So and then you've got your rib. Your 107 rib would be a 3-inch cut opposite the eye here, 4 on our chuck end. Then this would actually be chined, but to keep everything holding together for one more session, we left that in place. Then the other thing that we'd do is actually pull out the blade bone, and that'd be a 107 rib. Then what we would do is go ahead and take off those feather bones, cut it down to a 2x2, pull off your rib lifter muscle, and that's where you get a 109E or an export rib. So within that, you've got 7 full ribs. So every now and then you'll have somebody that says, well, there's a little bit too much strip on the strip side. Well, if I do my job right at the plant, it's in my favor to actually go ahead and put as much weight on the rib. So I'm going to go ahead and cut as close to that 13th rib as I can to make it look like a strip on this side. Because in today's market, that's about a $2 to $3 premium on the ribeye versus the strip loin. But if you count in between those rib muscles, you could actually account for that and see that there are only 7. So then we'll talk a little bit about back ribs. So there's a meaty back rib, which if I go and take my knife and just cut straight down, that's what generates a meaty back rib. But once again, kind of a similar concept to the ribeye versus the strip. Most of the time we're going to go in and scrape those ribs as close as we can, and you'll see that intercostal muscle show up on your ribeye roll, or ribeye, because that back rib, even at a center cut premium, is only probably worth about $350 versus the ribeye this week's probably about $850. So a huge difference in value, and the reason why that you'll find that on your ribeye itself.
When Scott is talking about the meaty back ribs, you see these shingles on the belly of the ribeye. If on the meaty back ribs, these shingles are going to be attached on the beef back rib.
So and then as I pulled off our rib lifter muscle, Mario's got a piece out there, but essentially you'll see the connective tissue being that blue piece, and it's really fairly cleaned up. This is great for rib lifter as far as for cutlets, stew meat, stir fry. So and then if you were to have everybody's favorite cut up here, the spinalis, which is known as the ribeye cap, isn't the same as cap and wedge meat, for one. And then if somebody's ever selling a cheap, what your customer says, a cheap cap steak from a ribeye, it's probably coming off of your rib lifter, or it's a misprint or a misverbiage, because that spinalis itself is not going to be as cheap as your rib lifter. So next we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about short ribs, because that's everybody's biggest challenge, because short ribs could be boneless, they could be bone-in, there's multiple different ways to get them and multiple different things that people call them. So one thing we'll start off with is the easiest way to differentiate between your rib short rib, your 3-rib short rib, so there's 3 ribs here, versus your chuck short rib. And the easiest way to remember which one's which and how many ribs do they have, rib has 3 letters in it. That means it's your rib short rib has 3 bones. So it's very simple to remember that, versus your chuck short rib that has 4 ribs and is a little bit meatier than your traditional rib short rib. The other thing, if somebody says that they're doing a boneless short rib and their price is twice as high as what a normal short rib bone-in would be, then they probably actually are getting a true boneless short rib, versus if they're doing just a boneless short rib, pull off our spinal column and ribs, they probably are actually going in and getting a chuck flap short rib. That is what most of the brunch places will actually use for a short rib itself. So a little bit different, but the main thing is if it's a boneless chuck short rib and it's not like $12 or more a pound, it's probably your chuck flap, not the actual one. So another common question is, why are there only 3 or 4 ribs on most short ribs? Well, if you look at this, this would be the first short rib on the chuck side, and there's no meat on that itself. That's because that muscle, the serratus ventralis, the sawtooth muscle, has already ran out before it got there. So that happens on your rib short rib too. We're not going to add another rib to it and have no lean for you to actually eat.